speak with a very thick accent, so you're not going to understand a thing I say to you. And the other thing is that, you know, TED Talks tend to sort of make you want to do a sermon. It's very good that this one's on a Sunday. You're getting preached at quite a lot, and I'm going to continue to preach, but because I'm Australian, it's going to say something slightly weird. I'm going to defend being grumpy. I'm going to suggest that part of what you as a generation are facing are problems that are so great that unfortunately you can't really solve them with a hackathon, and you can't really just get lots of little wins as you go. You just are going to have to spend a long time persisting at these, and you're going to have to make gradual transitions, and you're never really going to know whether you're there or not. And that means you have to have very different kinds of satisfiers. You need to have different parts of your brain. I'm not quite sure where the grumpy bit is, but I'm here to champion the grumpy bit. You might be able to wave a magnet over it and possibly enlarge it. Okay, so there are lots of problems in the world right now. Generations like me and those above me are dumping all of them on you and saying, good luck. So there's climate change, inequality, a whole bunch of things that we've made absolutely no progress on whatsoever, despite the fact that we've been very aware of them for a long time. And this is kind of a bit of a downer. I think some of us have some issues that need to be dealt with, as Tamara was talking about, but almost all of us are kind of living in a situation of guilt right now. We go shopping, we try to make a difference, you never really can, we think we might do something, it's always pathetic. We're just constantly in a state of worry that there is not enough to do. And I think this is why right now people are very enamored of design. Designers are at least these crazy idiots who still are optimistic. The rest of us just think it's not really going to work. Whereas designers go out there and do it. And then on the other hand, we don't really believe they're going to do it, which is why we say it's okay to fail. Because we're thinking, yeah, I don't think it's really going to amount to things. I don't think we're actually going to get there. Now, perhaps this is just because I am Gen X. This is me, this is my film. I studied Martin Heidegger when I was at university. Perhaps I'm just being this moaning, complaining slacker. We are part of the problem. We never really got to any position of influence because the boomers hung around so long, and now you devastatingly ambitious millennials are just going to trash us. We've got no superannuation, you're just going to take care of us when we're old. We're another one of those wicked problems you're going to inherit. So let me just go back a bit and say, okay, so design. So why design? Why is everybody really interested in this discipline? Why did I, for example, jump out of philosophy and think, too much ivory tower, we need actually some way of making a difference? Why did I think it was design? Why didn't I go learn to code? Why didn't I go engineering? Why didn't I go to business? So I want to talk to you a bit about design, and I want to say design also is not always so beautifully colourful like the post-it notes out in the corridor. And I want to show you just some of the complexities behind it so that I can, in the end, kind of argue, well, we need to be a bit grumpy about this. One of the reasons why a lot of people think that we should be turning to design right now is because design got us into this mess in the first place. Every single thing that you are wearing, every single thing that you are using, every single thing you are sitting in, everything in this room, everything that touches you 24/7 is the responsibility of a designer. The way in which you live is the result of what designers do. It's really bizarre we know so little about what they do, given how much they touch us all the time. So if we're in a big mess, and we certainly are in a big mess, then it must be them that got us in the mess, and then through some weird logic of homeopathy, we say they're the ones who have to get us out of it. Since they got us in, they must know how to get out. You know, but there's always that Einstein quote that says you can't get out of a problem using the same thinking that you got in. But nevertheless, we think, well, that was designers. We need to turn to designers. But did they get us into this problem? Are they actually the ones who are to blame? Is it design, or is it something to do with the multiples of designs which don't really have any large-scale design behind them? Well, let me give you some examples, and it's going to be a bit professorial, and I apologise. So let's talk about this guy. I quite like this guy. I don't know how many people recognise that this is the man who gave us the idea of disposability in a lot of ways. And we now understand that this was a huge disaster. This is the person who told us that it was more convenient to just take a whole bunch of resources, packaged into a beautiful little thing, use them once and throw them away. So this will lead to fast food, this will lead to the entire of the 20th century economy. In a lot of ways we sit there and say, it was this guy. And this guy kind of perpetuates the story because he tells a myth about how he came up with the disposable razor blade. And the myth is that he had a friend who used to make a ceramic lid and a wire, and you snap them on, and then they're actually reusable. They're really great. You can empty the bowl, you can wash it out, and it's still got its cap on it. Well, that also has a rubber seal on it, and at some particular point he couldn't get hold of Indian rubber anymore, and so he thought, what am I going to do? And someone else came and said, well, what you should do is crimp metal over the top of the bottle lined with cork. And so we got the crimped cap. Every beer bottle now has one. And it is a disposable item. You bend it off, falls on the ground, thank you, I drink. Now, he didn't mean to make disposability, that guy, this friend of King C. Gillette. He just happened to be forced into it because Indian rubber went out the window. And so then when King C. Gillette came and said, I want to be rich, what should I do? The myth is that this guy said to Gillette, you should go look for something that could be disposable. There's money in disposability. And the way the myth goes, King C. Gillette was shaving with his strap raver and then kind of decided, okay, well look, I'm going to make this disposable. And then he was successful and disposability was the whole of the 20th century. Now, that is a complete and utter myth. In fact, King C. Gillette was an industrial designer. In fact, he spent almost a decade iterating over and over again trying to make better shaving. He really did actually want to make shaving better. He wanted to make it so that you couldn't hurt yourself, so that if you weren't particularly skilled, A, you could do it yourself, and B, you wouldn't nick yourself. So he was going to put a bar there, and that bar would hold it in exactly the right place so that the blade wasn't going to nick you. But then he needed a very small blade, and it needed to be very sharp. I thought this story is going to get rather academically boring, right? He needed to make it very sharp, and now he was faced with the classic trilemma that all designers face. In this case, he wanted it to be sharp, he wanted it to be durable, and he wanted it to be cheap. But it can only ever be two of those three. So he chose sharp and cheap. When the blades were originally sold, he was amenable to actually getting them resharpened for you. They were not sold originally as disposable. This is not the man who invented disposability. He kind of ended up in it because he was trying to solve an actual problem. To some extent, it wasn't that he was seeking disposability, he was undergoing a type of design. So it's a complicated business. By the way, just a brackets, something I find really interesting about King C. Gillette. All the time, before, during, and after doing razor blades, this is actually what he was interested in. Right? It's not Hilton Hotels. What it is, in fact, is a utopia based in Rochester. It was getting all its power from Niagara. It was basically a situation in which nobody owned anything. They just lived in these apartments and all services were provided centrally and efficiently in the middle. This was a great big passion of a lot of people in America at the end of the 19th century. Documented by Dolores Hayden, called The Material Feminists, following a guy called David Bellamy, who had a future scenario, and he was a social fiction, not a science fiction. What was going to change was how we actually lived, not the technologies that we used. Very interesting version, very rare these days. Anyway, total aside, forget I even told you that. So let's look at another kind of example, a more current example, again, one in the relation to disposability. There was a lot of story that the first generation iPhone had a shocking battery. And this was clearly a case of deliberate accelerated obsolescence by a manufacturer who knew that they were going to have to force us into subsequent iterations. Now, perhaps that was part of the benefit, but it would be really nice if this was a conspiracy, because then all we'd need to do is round up all CEOs and put them in Guantanamo Bay and the solution would be there. But in fact, it's because, again, there was a very complicated system. This was one of the most amazing industrial coups that have ever happened. This was the arrival of a bursting of one particular brand into a whole new domain that no one anticipated. And to do that, they had to be very secretive about how they were doing purchasing. And if Apple was suddenly seen to be buying top-level batteries for phones, it would have been picked up immediately by investors. It would have been, Nokia would have got a picture of it. Instead, they were forced to buy second-rate batteries. There was always a sense they were going to do subsequent iterations, but they were going to do subsequent iterations because they had to teach people how to use smartphones. Nokia had completely failed at that. This was an educational activity. Getting people used to smartphones, introducing video, there were subsequent stages. So now the design is very different, and to some extent we all know this. Again, the kind of myth perpetuated in the company is that these people, these designers, Johnny Ives, etc., they're genuine, authentic people delivering real value. They are actually engaged in the principle of design. So is it designers who are getting us into this trouble, or is it part of the system? Is it the fact that they are able to create new worlds, but just not in conditions of their own choosing? Is it that they are always working, but finish things? They materialise, they have particular deliveries, they feel like, yes, I did that. And this is more of the problem that I want to try and get at, and this is part of the reason why I want to talk about something strange like grumpiness. Last example, very cruelly, just because I've got the stage in Pittsburgh, something to moan about as somebody who's not from round here. I deliberately brought my family, lived in the city, very close to both my work and school. I'm very big on walkability, on decarbonising, on not using cars. You know the one thing that stops my children walking to school? This illegal and stupid practice in which cars are being nice to each other is the biggest threat to pedestrians ever. Some idiot dashing in front of the traffic, waving at the other car, thank you so much for being a nice Pittsburgher. Bam goes the pedestrian, my two children walking to school. I am working by design. I have an attitude, I have something, values that I want to realise, and I can't. Because they are literally, this is wired into a lot of street lights that give the left turn first. So this is the conditions in which we are now operating, conditions of not our own choosing. Conditions in which we don't want disposability but end up there, in which it gives us certain values, it allows us to work in lots of different ways. So as a result, I would suggest the condition in which you millennials are going to have to live for the 21st century is one that you need to admit is monstrous. And I mean that quite literally in the kind of Mary Shelley way. And I think this is a really important thing to understand about design. It's nice to say that design is about empathising with people. I think what design is actually about is empathising with things, or with people as thingly things. Designers are people who make things fuse with people, and once that unit is fused, it's on a trajectory that's very difficult to break. Designers are the people who clothe you. One of the fantastic things about this hurtling through space right now into deep space is that when aliens find it and come to Earth, and they only ever come to North America, because if they went to Sub-Saharan Africa or East Asia, they're not going to find people who look like that. But they only ever come to North America, and they're not going to find us either. Because I never walk around the street like that, much as I'd like to. You are not that, you are bethinged, you are designed. There are a whole bunch of things fusing to you right now. Clothes, chairs, air conditioning systems, carpets. Designers are the people, trigger warning, horrible image. Designers are the people who fuse things to people. Yes, it's not guns that kill people, it's people that kill people. No, it's people with guns. Hyphenated concept. A people with a gun is a monster. That's what that is. It fuses with you. You can be fused for good. Your weight is taken away from you. You're weightless because of the seat, so you can listen to the stuff I'm talking to you about. But this makes for a very complicated world. And this means that designers can't just keep working on solutions. They can't just think, I'm going to spend a hackathon, 1, 2, 3 days, bang, solution. What we don't need is one more solution. This just came across my Twitter feed a couple of days ago, the most nightmarish scenario I've ever seen. 5 different phones communicating with this driver so that he can participate in a number of sharing economies. Uber, Lyft, regular taxi, etc. We do not need one more thing. This is part of the problem, this kind of solutionist way of proceeding. These problems are large and intractable. They don't need serial monogamists who just fall in love with one project. Good, I've done that one, I'm never doing that kind of project again, give me another one. So when you hear design as a solution, you always have to be a little critical. Designers have this kind of problem. Now as a result, over at CMU, we're starting to talk more about transition. We don't need solutions, we need change. We actually need to change the way we live. We actually need to change the built environment. We actually need to design things off our bodies and then fuse ourselves in new kinds of ways. And that is a long and hard and slow process. Do you millennials have the satisfiers for that? Are you too addicted to the kind of gamification to undertake long-term transition? Are you needing quick and instant rewards? Are you needing to feel like you've done this version of the iPhone, then this version of the iPhone? Or are you working within constantly evolving platform dynamics? As we just heard, that is part of the culture at somewhere like Facebook. Can you take that constant iteration and apply it to some of the social challenges we have? It's part of the problem of saying, how do you possibly do good without wanting to be caught doing it? Classic parenting dilemma, by the way. As soon as your kids are doing something fantastic, you feel like leaving them alone. When in fact, that's exactly when you're supposed to be in there saying, great, you're doing fantastic, I love what you're doing. Complete reverse, when they're being a nightmare, you rush in and give them all the attention they're actually looking for. So this is a very different version of being human. This is a human who is getting their drip feeds from something else, or they're not having drip feeds. They're in fact persisting in being quite grumpy. They have this very designerly sense that this is a project that is going to be going on and on and on. And I think almost as we heard in the second speech also by Tamara, that to some extent you have to think about the ongoing contribution, not the fact that you are going to win. Not the fact that you are going to be the person who succeeds, but that you are going to be making a long and slow contribution. Very different version of human, very different version of being happy. Not the optimistic one. The one, in fact, that I would suggest is monstrously grumpy.